This is Deborah Atkinson, and you're listening to Flipping 50, where I address your top questions and struggles. I share what to eat, how to move, and how to think to get the energy and the vitality that you want in this second and better half. And today, this episode is all about what to think. And I am so very thrilled to bring on Dr. Ellen Langer. You, if you've been in the Flipping 50 community for very long, have heard me talk about more than once Dr. Ellen Langer and her very early studies. She was what I would say very ahead of her time. She was beginning to study aging and mindfulness related to aging and how we age way before the rest of the world was actually paying attention to what a big difference this huge wave of baby boomers was going to make as they turned 50 and then as they retired. Back in 1979, she corrected me on, in our interview, she began at the age of 31 at the beginning of her career at Harvard to research. We'll share some of the studies that I often talk about in her words. And let me introduce to you, Dr. Ellen Langer is a social psychologist and the first female professor to gain tenure in the psychology department at Harvard University. She's the author of 11 books and more than 200 research articles written for general and academic readers on mindfulness for over 35 years. Her best-selling books include Mindfulness, The Power of Mindful Learning, On Becoming an Artist, Reinventing Yourself Through Mindful Creativity, and Counterclockwise, Mindful Health and the Power of Possibility. Her most recent book is The Art of Noticing, which pairs one-liners culled from her research with her original paintings. Dr. Langer has been described as the mother of mindfulness and the mother of positive psychology. Among other honors, she is the recipient of a Guggenheim Fellowship and 3 Distinguished Scientist Awards, the World Congress Award, the NYU Alumni Achievement Award, and the Stats Award for Unifying Psychology. Most recently, she received the Liberty Science Genius Award. The citation for the APA Distinguished Contributions Award reads, in part, her pioneering work revealed the profound effects of increasing mindful behavior and offers new hope to millions whose problems were previously seen as unalterable and inevitable. Ellen Langer has demonstrated repeatedly how our limits are of our own making. And here she is, Dr. Ellen Langer. Dr. Langer, thanks so much for joining me today.
My pleasure.
And of course, we are here talking to an audience that doesn't want to settle, that is not ready to accept their second 50 the way prior generations has, and yet they may struggle with that a little bit. So I want to dive into literally some of the research that I so often talk about, 2 of your studies in particular, and the one that you did back in 1981. And I want to ask, what made you do this, the counterclockwise study?
Sure.
Because you were way ahead of your time. Back in 1981, the rest of the world wasn't yet talking about the baby boomer move and how we would all be impacted. What led you to this study?
Okay, so we were developing a theory about mind-body unity, which is very simple, that mind and body, these are just words, and because people take them to have greater meaning than they do, research hasn't gone any place because people spend their time looking for, well, how do you get from this fuzzy thing called a thought to something material called the body? And I said, well, let's just put the mind and body back together. And if we put the mind and body back together, then wherever we're putting the mind, we're necessarily putting the body. So we have a series of studies, many, many studies, where we put the mind in unusual places and take measurements from the body. The counterclockwise study that you're referring to was the first one that we did. So here was a case where we took men who were in their 80s, and that was, as you said, in 1979, actually. That's when 80 was 80, not the new 60. So they were old. And what we did was to have them live in a retreat that we had retrofitted to 20 years earlier, that they were going to live there as if they were their younger selves. So they were going to be talking about past events in the present tense. They were going to be watching movies and television shows about the past, but again, as if they were just unfolding right now, and so on. And they did this for a week. And what we did was take lots of measures before we started, and then repeat the measures at the end. And what we found was that their vision improved, their hearing improved, their memory improved, their strength improved. We even took photographs of them before the study started, and then again at the end, and found that they actually looked younger. Now, truth be told, they didn't look 20 years younger, but still noticeably younger. And this study has been replicated in England, South Korea, and the Netherlands. So I think that what's amazing about it was that all these changes took place in just a week's time.
Yeah, I do too. And so I have a question. So in follow-up, when you removed them from that environment, what happened? Did you check back with them?
No, that's a wonderful question, and I've been asked that so many times that it no longer embarrasses me since I didn't do the follow-up. This occurred. I had just gotten tenure, and as the first tenured woman in the department, and I was so young, I was 31 years old or whatever, that it was too exciting, and I just didn't bother. When I decided that it was time to follow up, it was already like 10 years later, and I didn't follow up because I thought probably they're going to be dead by now. But part of my excuse was that I was sure that if the environment that they were returning to was going to be supporting their younger selves, then the effects would continue. Would they continue endlessly? Probably not, but I don't know for how many years into the future. If the environment was going to now treat them as it did before, as if they were falling apart, and, the stereotype we have of the typical old person in need of help and, so on, that they would immediately regress to that. But, it's an experiment that's waiting to be done.
So two things. So if I were to summarize, I would say, be careful what you're thinking because your body's listening, and that you need to surround yourself with a community of people who are doing what you want to do or what you aspire to do.
Yeah, okay, so I think that I would put not be careful because I think that the data are fabulously exciting and powerful and thinking of all the possibilities they present to us. So rather than be careful your body is listening, it's because your body is listening you can accomplish great things. And that old age can be a period of growth rather than decline the way most people see it.
Excellent. So the way you talk and the language that you use.
Yeah.
The second one was I'm trying to take notes. And, surrounding yourself with a village. Because of the resistance.
Yeah, I think it's always good to have around us people who are supportive. And I don't know whether one person is enough, whether we need a whole village or what have you. But I think that people need to recognize that they become victims of other people's negative expectations. And so you want to surround yourself by people who are supporting the very things you want to be and become. And that's true throughout our lives, not just when we reach 50 to 100.
When you first did this study, so you said you were 31, did you experience a lot of resistance in doing the study?
It's interesting that I mark the edge of the optimism continuum. And I'm just one of these happy campers. I did the study. I wrote it up. I published it. And lots of people have talked about it since. I mean, it's even on a Simpsons episode. It's a Simpsons go to Havana. So it's out there in the world. But if there was some negative pushback, I never noticed it. And certainly didn't deter me because we followed it up with lots of other mind-body studies. And some of them are also relevant to seniors. For example, when you go to an eye doctor and you look at the Snelling eye chart, what the chart is telling you implicitly, and I'm one of the few people who feel this way, the chart is saying soon I'm not going to be able to see.
Yes.
And so creating an expectation that I won't be able to see, because as you go down the chart, the letters get smaller and smaller. So I wondered, what would happen if we reverse the chart? So now the expectation would be soon I would be able to see. And so we did this, and what happened was people were able to see what they couldn't see before. Something else we did, because most people, when they look at this chart, have trouble around 2/3 of the way down. So what we did was present the chart where we started 1/3 of the way down. So now 2/3 of the way from that are, again, going to be much smaller letters. And again, people could see what they weren't able to see before. So that even saying that as you get older, your vision has to become bad, your memory has to, all of these things often become self-fulfilling prophecies. And that with respect to vision, because I got that both in the study I just described and the counterclockwise study and some others we haven't discussed, that if you assume that your vision is going to be bad, then you get glasses and you become dependent on them, which is fine. You just need to know that there probably was another way. So I had this experience about 2 years or so ago. I used to wear a contact lens in one eye for reading, and the other eye was basically for vision. And one night I get home, and I'm struggling. I was killing myself trying to get that damn lens out of my eye, only to realize I never put it in. And then I realized, I said, gee, I saw fine all day long. And I haven't worn lenses or contact lenses since. You have to know there are going to be times you're going to see better than other times. If you're tired, if you're hungry, if you don't want to see that particular person, it might take longer for them as they approach you for you to recognize them, and so on. I know that when I'm hungry, I can see the restaurant sign very far away. So our vision, like everything else, varies in the course of the day. But what we tend to do is hold it still. And I don't have time to go into the details now, but people can read about some of this in my Counterclockwise Mindful Health and the Power of Possibility book, or wait another, 6 months or so for my new book, where I describe a very different way of healing based on this mind-body unity idea. I can give you an example of one of these studies, again, not just related to older people, but for everybody. So we took people who have diabetes, type 2 diabetes. They come into the study to give them all sorts of tests. Then we're going to have them play computer games, and the reason will be clear in a moment. They're told, we want you to change the game you're playing every 15 minutes or so, and that will ensure that they look at the clock that's next to the computer. For 1/3 of the people, the clock is going twice as fast as real time. For 1/3 of the people, the clock is going half as fast as real time. For 1/3 of the people, it's real time. And the question we're asking is, does blood sugar level follow real or perceived time? And the answer is perceived time. So the bottom line to all of this, old or young, is that we have far more control over our physical well-being, over our health, and indeed our happiness than most people realize.
Interestingly enough, I'm reading right now, you are the placebo, where you and your work, of course, are mentioned. So
yes.
it plays right into this. What if our listeners, many of them are trying to change physical aspects of hormonal changes that have gotten a hold of them right now, and they're thinking, I've always been overweight, or I've had insomnia forever. If I suggest those are the statements, maybe limiting beliefs that they have, how would you suggest they change them?
Well, I think that let's take insomnia, for example. The starting assumption is that we're supposed to get a certain amount of sleep every day. And I want to know who said that and based on what population. That if you sat in front of the television, or let's say I sat in front of the television all day long and you ran a marathon, it doesn't make sense that we'd need the same amount of sleep that night. Our need for sleep and the amount of sleep we actually get varies. And even if it's only varying by, let's say, a half hour, we need to pay attention to why now did I sleep a half hour longer or fall asleep a half hour later or sooner. And by noticing these things, then we're going to end up with more control over them. But I don't think that any of these problems are intractable. We've done research now with MS, ALS, severe traumatic brain injury, anxiety, chronic pain, arthritis, lots of the big disorders. And we teach people attention to symptom variability. And as a result, we find a decrease in all of the symptoms across the board. So what do I mean by attention to symptom variability? Most of the people, when you have something, you think it's steady state. So if you take the person with insomnia, they think they can never sleep, which is just not true. They are sleeping some nights. But when they're sleeping, they're not paying attention to the fact that they're sleeping. They only pay attention to how tired they are on the day they didn't sleep. So by noticing the positive changes, when is it good, when is it bad, and asking why, we end up with more control than people realize that they have. The same thing for the vision that we spoke of. If you think about vision, that people think they're going to see the same way. You go to a doctor, they give you the silly chart, and they tell you what your vision is, and then you think that's going to be your vision every day, all day long. But of course it's not going to. If you're hungry, you're going to see differently from if you're not hungry. If you're tired, your vision will be different. If you're happy, your vision will be different, and so on. And so if you did that rather than reach for eyeglasses, you saw that, around 3 o'clock every day, my vision is interrupted because I'm tired, then you have a choice. You can either wear the glasses or you can take a nap or have an energy bar or something. So it's in noticing these subtle changes, which is the essence of mindfulness as I study it, where the key to our health and well-being lies.
So the trick then lies in how do we develop that? What are the steps to enhance our own mindfulness?
I think that step one is read my books. No.
Okay. And the readers, listeners, I will link to that. Yep.
Okay. They can just listen to some of my lectures online. They don't have to read the books, but the books are fun and easy reading. I think that people need to recognize that mindfulness, and this is mindfulness as I study it and have for over 40 years, is the very simple process of noticing new things. And as you notice new things about the things you thought you knew, you come to see you didn't know them as well as you thought you did. So then your attention naturally goes to it, and everything becomes new again. And as you're doing this active noticing, the neurons are firing, you're engaged in what you're doing. Turns out that other people find you more attractive. Everything you're doing is improved, and you live longer. So that's the first step, is to increase our mindfulness. How do you increase your mindfulness? You recognize that you don't know the things that you think you know. Everything is changing. Everything looks different from different perspectives. Just pay attention to the person you think you know best. Find 5 new things about this person. Take a walk and notice 5 new things about the environment around you, so on and so forth. And the more you notice about the things you thought you knew, the more convinced you become that you didn't know it. And when you can really develop the understanding that uncertainty is the rule, not the exception, then you approach everything that way. And with that, with that modicum of uncertainty, then there's reason to tune in. People say be in the moment. It's an empty instruction. Nobody who's not there knows that they're not there. The way to be in the moment is this active noticing. That puts you in the present.
Active noticing. Love that.
Right.
The other study that I love to refer to is the one that you did with Aaliyah Crum with the 4 hotel workers. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Okay, that was the other study, the second study in the mind-body unity idea. So we took chambermaids, and first thing we asked them was how much exercise do they get. Well, even though they're working, exercising all day long, they don't see it as exercise because they think, according to the Surgeon General, exercise is what you're doing afterward. So what we did was then take half of them, and we taught them that their work is exercise. Making a bed is like working at this machine at the gym, and so on. So now we have two groups. One group believes that their work is exercise. The other doesn't think of their work that way. We take all sorts of measures. When we come back at the end of the study, we want to find out, did she eat any different? Did you eat any differently? Did you work any? No difference on any of those measures. But on the important measures, because we didn't want them to be, because the only explanation for this change that I'm going to tell you about, we wanted to be the change in their mindset, that now they saw their work as exercise. As a result of changing their mind in this way, they lost weight, there was a change in waist to hip ratio, body mass index, and their blood pressure came down.
Amazing.
Remarkable.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So that brings, for all those people who are exercising at home or in a gym, the thought of literally focusing on the good and the benefits that any of it is doing could, in fact, heighten your progress.
Yeah, right, exactly. You know, you want to see it as exercise. You want to make sure you have a positive mindset about exercise. You know, if you saw exercise as terrible and now you saw your work as exercise, then that would have negative consequences. But
I love that you said that it's, if you see it as terrible. So the biggest obstacle for a lot of people, men or women, especially who may be over 50 because they were socialized differently about exercise, is that it's hard or it's punishment.
Right.
It's a way to change a body they don't love already. And we run from things that are hard. So
yeah, I think that we have lots of mistakes in our understandings of the things we're doing even every day or once in a blue moon. Nothing should be hard. Nothing. That work should be fun. Exercise should be fun. Everything one is doing should be fun. And that we give up too quickly by assuming that work has to be stressful, exercising has to be difficult. It's very easy to make things fun. All you need to do is this act of noticing, and you become totally engaged. And then there's also the reverse Zeno that I describe in the Counterclockwise book. So Zeno had a paradox with respect to distance, which was, if you always go half the distance from where you are to where you want to get, you're never going to get there. You know, you can be an inch away, then you're a half an inch away, then you're a quarter of an inch away, but you're never quite there. And I argue that Zeno must have been a cynic, because we can turn this around and say there is always a distance you can go from where you are to where you want to get, which is a very positive thing. So you want to stop eating a box of cookies and you can't stop eating the box, stop eating a half a box. You can't stop eating half a box, stop eating a quarter of the box. You can't. Everybody can eat a crumb less. And then, then you have a different starting point for the next time. There's always a step small enough from where you are to where you want to get that you can be successful. If you don't come down hard on yourself, there's the process should be fun, and then you do it willingly, easily.
Fantastic. Yeah, great. So let's make it fun. So got that. I mean, this is almost 4 decades after, well, it actually is, if it was 79, 4 decades after that original study. You've been quoted, your research has been cited many times in regard to placebo and the power of positive thinking. We now, finally, we're using and we're hearing the word mindset so much more often. Do you think we're getting it, the majority of us, or is it still mindset that limits us?
No, I think that understanding mindfulness and mindlessness is more important. That a mindset is just being mindless. And there's a way that it's often used that conflates different understandings of it. I don't think any particular word really matters. I think what is important is what the word is trying to convey. And so this word being mindful is a word that it speaks to process, speaks to engagement, speaks to something that's enlivening. In fact, we find that when we make people more mindful by this act of noticing, that it's literally and figuratively enlivening. And that you can have a mindset that prevents all of this, a mindset that being old means you're going to fall apart, a mindset that when you're 70 years old, your memory is going to be bad, and then those things become self-fulfilling prophecies. So in that way, a mindset is nothing other than just our own mindlessness. I don't remember your question mindlessly. So,
you hit it. You know, I really was asking about mindset, but you actually defined a better way to describe the change that we're seeking anyway. So in looking around, you were then 31. You're now not. When you look around at others who are peers, when you look around at your peers,
yeah,
and I love that. Yes, so amen. Are you living the mindfulness about your age, or is it just not even a factor? It doesn't matter. It's all ability.
No, I think that I live my life as Ellen Langer, and my age is typically irrelevant. Although I have been told, I was told by a friend the other day, I was helping this old woman with something because she was old, and my friend said, she's probably younger than you are. So I have no sense of how old I am. I don't feel any much different from when I was 40. Hopefully I'm wiser. But, I don't have any problem with getting older. I think that so many of the things that we worry about when we're younger just become silly when you become older. That in some ways it's a breath of fresh air. I read about this someplace where, and remember when you were 2 years old and you fell and you got a bruise on your knee and you cried. It was like the world was going to come apart. And then you turn 7 and Johnny or Janie doesn't send you a Valentine in school and you're devastated. It just keeps going until you finally get to the point where you recognize that none of these things matter. And then you become more in control of your emotions, and then can create the life that you've always wanted to have.
Fantastic. And are you still actively doing research?
Oh, yes, I have always about 20 to 30 studies going on, or trying to go on.
The new book. Can you tease a little bit for us about the new book? That was a delightful surprise. I had no idea.
All I'll say is that the title is Why Not? The Psychology of Possibility. And it's a way of showing people all the things that they think can't be, that I'm questioning, and then present data to show actually they can be. So,
and when is that coming out? Okay.
It's never clear. I don't know how many books you've written, but with each draft you think now it's done, and then you find out, I should add this or change that. So let's just say it will come out at some point.
Great. Fantastic. Any other studies that we should share with this group of women who are really seeking change and seeking to, they want the positive message. They want to believe they can age the way they want.
I said to you before that they should read the books, and I said it sort of jokingly, but my books have all this research in it. And so get it from the library. But if you look at them, then you'll see, here's a study about memory. Here's a study about having a younger spouse. They're all over the place. And, there are obviously things that tie them all together. But too many for me to talk about. And I think that people should do some of the reading so that they find the things that are interesting to them. And there's enough in there. I have since 1974 been arguing for growth in late adulthood. many people at that time, still to this day, see development as what happens when you're younger, and then all of a sudden, I don't know, 40, 50, things turn around and you're no longer developing, you're aging. And I haven't seen it didn't see it from the beginning, and I still don't see it that way. So I have lots of research on things like memory, health, happiness, relationships, and so on. So
what's
I invite
the difference?
you to take a look. Okay, go on.
What's the difference in men versus women in terms of mindfulness? Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know. I think that being a woman, there are ways that I think are instances where I think women are more mindful, because the more you think you know, the less you're interested in finding out. And so women have been taught that to be less certain. And uncertainty is the most important factor in becoming mindful. So I would guess, but, we could describe a situation where, men might outperform women on this task, vice versa. The most important takeaway about that is that the distributions are highly overlapping, highly correlated. It's not here we have all the men can do it and none of the women, or vice versa. So okay. I don't think, I think that you don't want to absent yourself from something because men do it better, or a man to not do it because women tend to do it. I think that as you get older, you should play the game of all rules are turned off. You decide how you want to be in this world, and then just do it.
All rules are turned off as of now.
Yes.
Fantastic. Yeah. Yes. Great quote. Dr. Langer, last but not least, hardest question potentially of the day. Is there a question that I should have asked you?
No.
Okay.
The questions you asked me were fine. I've enjoyed this, and I wish you and your audience well.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to that new book.
Okay. Take care now.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All of the links that we talked about, including how to reach and learn a little bit more about Dr. Langer, will be in the show notes, including her website, the link to Counterclockwise, the book. I'll mention a little bit about the new book title so that you can put that in your want list for next spring or late this year, depending on when that'll come out, and a couple articles where Dr. Langer is quoted. And don't forget, this episode, if it makes you aspire to new possibilities, is sponsored by my Stronger One strength training program, one of the number one ways to increase the power, literally, and the strength that you have as you age, inside and out, is to implement strength training into what you're doing. And now you know the way you think about that strength training could amplify your results. And I'll link to it right now. We're open for enrollment. If you're listening to the show notes later, you will still be able to get on the announcements or notifications list for when we first open and when there's a juicy discount for the early bird rate. Do you have a question based on today's episode? Leave it below the show link at flipping50.com/counterclockwise. I love hearing from you. And if this episode was helpful, please leave a rating in iTunes. It really helps. And then share it with a friend so you can surround yourself with a supportive community of women on the same journey. To get the most from this week's episode, again, check out today's show notes. I add some juicy transcript notes from my interview with Ellen, and that is flipping50.com/counterclockwise, where you'll find everything you need to get a hold of her, learn more, and potentially read more about Flipping 50 with me.